What does someone need to know about water quality?
As we all know, we can't survive without water, and certainly our plants can't survive without water. And water is really the single biggest factor that affects raising plants. And so some places in the country, they have fabulous water. I was just in Central Coast last couple of weeks, and from Los Angeles northward, they have a completely different water supply than we do in San Diego. And I was in Carmel, and the water coming out of the shower was soft and wonderful. And I'm thinking, man, this is like beautiful, pure water. And then I come to take a shower in San Diego, and it's full of dissolved solids. It's very hard. It's salty. It's really not great water. And so the water you use on your plants will affect the plant's growth. And, I know you love the edible stuff. Well, my entire backyard is everything edibles. The front yard's one thing, but the backyard is fruit trees and vegetable gardens. And I want to have good water on these things. And so what you'll discover in San Diego is our water is very salty. It comes from Colorado. It's really the western part of the Continental Divide, runs through Colorado. It goes through New Mexico and Arizona. And it's in that Great Basin that's picking up lots and lots of salt and lots of dissolved solids. By the time it reaches us in San Diego, it doesn't taste good. It's really high in salt, and it's hard on the plants.
I know from my hydroponic days, which is how I started gardening, you obviously will test your water before you add any nutrients into it. And I believe from a parts per million perspective, San Diego water, at that time at least, was somewhere in the 400 to 500 parts per million of sort of non-water, non-H2O particles in there, which that's where you get into the calcium and the magnesium and some of these salts that you're talking about, which obviously have a lasting impact on the plants compared to how these plants would have been watered in the wild, which is for the most part just from rain or the flows of that rain over a landscape.
Right. And a lot of people fail to realize too, they think, well, I'm on a well, and so I have this unlimited amount of water that's really great water. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You know, if you were here back during the times of colonization, when the Spanish were here, or the early 1900s, and farming is just getting started here, you could literally, in Mission Valley, you could hit groundwater at 2 feet in Mission Valley. In the El Cajon Valley, you could dig a well and have water at 10 to 15 feet. Well, now people are going down 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet to get water. And what you'll find, back in the day when there were a few thousand people living here, there's plenty of aquifer. There's a lot of water underground. But now the latest statistic I read in terms of numbers of wells in San Diego is at 75,000 wells. You have everybody tapping into that aquifer. And if you do a water test on your well, you'll also find your well is full of iron, or it might have very high nitrate levels even. And a lot of that is because of the number of septic systems that are around. So well water is not quite the answer either. And so the water quality makes a huge difference on the plants.
So it's a bit of a gloomy picture, I suppose, we're painting here is tap water, at least in this region, and obviously test your own region if you're listening, well water. What are you guys doing at the Botanic Garden, and is what you're doing actually feasible for someone like myself?
Well, we have 3 different watering systems at the Botanic Garden. So we have, for our conservatory, we actually have a very large, very robust reverse osmosis system. And then we have 2 500-gallon tanks that we will produce very pure, very clean water. And we use that for the orchids and the aeroids and the really pristine tropical stuff that's there. Then we have plain, potable tap water that everybody else has. And one of the things you'll find, and if you raise cherimoya or if you raise mango or avocado, you'll find that after a season of irrigating, your leaves at the end of the season are just terrible. They're half brown. They've look dried and desiccated. That's because of the salts we have in our tap water. And we're always looking forward to rain to leach that away and basically clean that up. And then the third type of water we have here, we actually use recycled water on about 40% of the garden. And recycled water is probably the way everything will go in California over time because we have more people and less water all the time. And the thing with recycled water is if you think tap water's bad, recycled water's worse. It's far saltier. It has, in fact, more concentrations of dissolved solids. So it's really tough to grow on. We find that we can even kill eucalyptus trees with it.
Wow.
Young eucalyptus. If we spray on the foliage, it burns the foliage and they turn black, and we'll have.
It's that salty. Wow.
It's that salty. It's really, really tough to grow plants with. We find that if you use inline drip irrigation, that even sensitive plants, we can get to muddle along. They won't look pristine or really even good, but we can at least, to a satisfactory level for us, we can keep them alive. But those, really, that's going to be the way water works for everybody going forward. And that's going to be, you either have RO, you've got tap water, or you have recycled. And so when it comes to my orchids or really sensitive houseplants, I'm using RO here at the garden, but at home, I have reverse osmosis under my sink too. So I'm going to use that water for the sensitive stuff.
If I don't have an RO filter, which I actually don't, I should think about it, but let's say I don't, right? Or someone listening does not and doesn't want to get one. What about running it through a Brita filter? What about using distilled? I'm throwing some options out there so that maybe someone can do something a little more accessible.
Well, you can get these days a pretty nice under sink system. Costco had them for maybe $300, $350, and then you change the cartridges out maybe once a year. So that's a pretty darn nice solution to do an under sink RO system. Certainly distilled water is great for the plants. If you don't have the RO, definitely do that, but that gets expensive too. It's $1.50, $2 a gallon for distilled water. If you just have tap water, though, one of the things you can do is just make sure that you leach your plants on a regular basis. So, maybe once a month, what I'll do, what I used to do before I had RO, I'll take the plant and literally submerge it in a bucket. So I completely cover the root ball and up into the top of the pot and soak it and then drain it away so that I'm getting all that salt draining away from it. So there are ways to mitigate it.
Watch the full episode right here and subscribe for more new episodes every single week.